Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, editor of PRWeek UK, and I'm joined by my PRWeek colleagues, editor-in-chief Danny Rogers and deputy editor Siobhan Holt. How are you both?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Good,
We're
good.
in May now, the busiest month of the year for us.
I know, doesn't stop. PR360 next week.
Yeah.
All happening. Today, talking of busy things we're doing, we're talking about PRWeek's biggest editorial project of the year, I would argue, the UK Top 150 Consultancies. This includes, of course, the ranking of the UK's 150 biggest PR agencies, plus lists of the biggest across different sectors such as consumer, corporate and healthcare, and other lists such as the fastest growing, biggest outside London and more. So plenty to get your teeth into. If you haven't seen it already, visit prweek.co.uk. So I wanted to bring out some of the top line findings from the project this year, which we can discuss. So really the overall thrust is that agencies had to run faster to stand still in 2025. Combined revenue of the top 150 for the 2025 calendar year accelerated slightly from 3.1 to 3.7%, but taking inflation into account, real growth fell from 0.6 to just 0.3%, so almost flat. And combined headcount was more or less flat too. More positively, many agencies did grow last year, some by quite a lot. So a little bit of a mixed picture, but concerning. Siobhan, what comments from agency leaders stood out for you from our coverage?
Well, it was actually a quote that I took from Hugh Taggart, which is from an interview that will be coming later on this month or early June. But basically, he was saying that he thinks 2025 has been a really challenging year, especially given the number of economic headwinds and political uncertainty. And obviously, he's now at Weber Shenwick, which is now part of Omnicom. So it's been a big change over at that agency, I think we can say. And he even said, throw in the biggest acquisition of a holding company ever in the industry, and you've got a pretty turbulent year, is how he described it. He said he thought Circumstances, although their performance last year was impressive considering those headwinds, and quite a few of the agencies that we interviewed sort of said that had seen some increase. But as you say, John, the reality is today is that you have to run hard to stand still, and that's exactly what Hugh said in his comments. Yeah, and we spoke to other leaders as well. So we spoke to Simon Redfern at Burson. He was a bit more positive in some ways. You know, he admitted that they're doing well now in Q4 and that they've had a better quarter of the last 26 months. So he's feeling a bit more upbeat. But he says he wasn't naive. He said he thinks it has been tough and that they're making the numbers, but he thinks everyone in the industry is worried. And what we're finding, he said, is that briefs are taking longer to go through the system and decision making is taking longer. As well as that, there's going to be the GEO, data intelligence and social influencer piece. So it's a real mixed bag.
Yeah, and those he flagged up as opportunities.
Yes, yeah, he did.
Obviously, search engine optimization is something we hear about a lot, isn't it? And this really came out across the top 150, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and specialisms, as I say, social and influencer piece, that was a real strong area for many.
Okay, any other comments that sort of struck you?
For me, the one that really stood out, just because I thought it described it best, was John Doe, because they said it was a tale of two halves, that they'd grown significantly over the past few years with some brilliant client wins, but that last January they've reached their 5-year anniversary with Tesco Mobile, which brought with it a procurement review and a change of team. And I know anecdotally we've heard that a lot, I think, from agencies, that there's been a lot of change in-house that's really impacted the agencies and how they're doing overall. So that's one that really did stand out for me.
Okay, and Danny, what struck you about the findings for 2025? Did anything surprise you in particular, or does it broadly match what you've been hearing?
Yeah, nothing much surprises me knowing what I do about the industry over the past couple of years. And what I would say in context, it's just been flat. The industry's been flat in 2024 and 2025 in real terms. And that's really quite unusual for PR, because usually PR has grown. If you go back to about when I first became editor of PRWeek, 2005, those years we were seeing 20-something% growth. And obviously we had a slowdown around the financial crash in about 2008, 2009. Then it just carried on growing again, probably by always double digits. The PR industry was always a double-digit annual growth business until the last few years. And the last few years, as you know, John and Siobhan, it slowed down to sort of post-pandemic, we were getting big spikes and then we were getting sort of 7-8%. And that was a sort of average 7-8% rise over the last I'd say the last sort of 15 years or so. But the last couple of years has just been flat. And, you get some anomalies, of course. You get some agencies, and I'm sure we'll go through them later in the conversation, who have had a very good year. Most agencies just haven't, if I'm honest, and particularly the big ones. I mean, and I think the big ones, again, we'll talk more in detail about the large agencies, but the big ones reflect the industry better, probably, because they're big generalist agencies with lots of clients employing hundreds and hundreds of people. And most of them are flat or down, right, this year. So I think that's really what it shows about the PR industry in the last couple of years. And I think 2025 was very similar to 2024. And there's not much growth there. Of course, there's growth in particular sectors. And again, we'll talk about that. Some sectors are up, some sectors are down. But overall, it's tough. It's really quite tough.
Yeah, and I think you talk about the big agencies. Obviously, they really reflect what's happening in the geopolitical world at the moment, don't they, as well, where there is a lot of turbulence, a lot of uncertainty, and that can have good things, but can have bad things in terms of what's going on. And obviously, one of the bad things is what's happening and what's certainly going to be happening to inflation. But that's just a never-ending problem for this industry and obviously every industry.
Well, I think you said it. I mean, it's just uncertain. Everything is uncertain. We know that when we read the newspapers and we talk about our own lives. And the economy is just very, very uncertain and has been for quite a few years now, really. So it's very difficult to run a business in such an uncertain environment, particularly if you're a generalist PR consultancy.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, Danny, what big trends can you tell us from the top 5 agencies this year?
Well, we have a new number 1 for this year for a start, which is Brunswick. It wasn't top last year, was it? Burson was top last year. So Brunswick was top this year with 95.4 million annual turnover, although actually it was flat. And the reason it's become number 1 was because Burson, which topped the table last year, has a minus 7% drop from last year at 95 million for 2025. And I think you can probably see that WPP, the decline probably hasn't helped Burson overall. Weber Shandwick at number 3 was 1% down on last year. Again, an agency that previously has grown very well. Edelman was another 4% down last year to 82.2 million. So, yeah, it's been tough for all the top 4, really, flat or down. Then at number 5, we had FTI Consulting, which did grow by 2% to 67 million annual turnover. And I think that shows that corporate generally has done better than consumer.
I think so. And actually, FTI had particularly strong growth in Q1 of this year. And I know this obviously relates to 2025, but it's really had a very strong growth in the first quarter in its Stratcoms division. So that definitely solidifies that point. It's probably worth saying as well that the ones from Weber and a few others are our estimates because the agencies don't actually submit their figures there.
Yeah,
but
always.
That's another story. So in recent weeks, PRWeek has been publishing insights into what people have been telling us from the Top 150 survey, alongside obviously the overall rankings by revenue. I'm going to pick up on a few of these. Firstly, redundancies. Sorry to be downbeat, but it is very important. According to our data, almost 30% of agencies made redundancies in 2025. That's up from about 25% in the previous year. This chimes with a lot of what we've been hearing, doesn't it?
Yeah, that actually chimes with a report that's out today, actually, John, that we got from a PR recruitment company. They said that people are hesitant to make the jump and that new data suggests that PR recruitment market surged in early 2026, although I must say that it's also failing to match the levels of 2025. They found that there was 32% rise in PR roles available in Q1 this year compared with previous quarters. So yeah, it's a very pertinent topic at the moment, I think. But the survey overall, though, there was a lot of comments around rise in employment costs, including national insurance changes, alongside a clear reduction in the output and resilience of new entrants to the industry. That was what one PR professional told us. And they also said that the incoming AI impact has forced a change to their recruitment strategy, which I thought was very interesting. And there were several that sort of took that approach. The other agencies that didn't freeze recruitment, nevertheless, still took a very cautious angle. And one anonymous agency said that they don't have a formal recruitment freeze in place, but are being cautious on hiring and predominantly using freelancers to cover work where additional support is needed. So there has been a real change, I think, in the approach to staffing.
I'm quite surprised, actually, that the headcount, John, you described as pretty much flat year on year. I'm surprised it's flat.
Do you think it should be down, Dan?
I think it should be down. From everything you've just said there, Siobhan, and everything, the stats on how many redundancies and the fact that 1 in 3 agencies have been making redundancies, you think the overall headcount would be down.
Well, it doesn't take into account mergers and acquisitions. That has quite a big impact on this. So if you think about, it takes probably a few agencies in that 150 to merge, and then suddenly their headcount went up by a lot, or seems to have gone up by a lot. So I think that distorts things a little bit.
It's a good point. You're not comparing the same 150 agencies every year. People need to understand that. Okay, most of the 150 agencies this year are the same as they were last year, but some aren't. And mergers and acquisitions change the complexity of the 150 a bit. So yeah, there might be just as many people employed in the 150 agencies this year, but they might be different agencies.
Yeah. I mean, and I think some agencies, have been hiring as well. And even if they make redundancies, it doesn't mean that there's necessarily a big kind of net loss of headcount, because they might be getting new roles in.
True.
And the ones being made redundant might be the ones that, what people say a lot, replaced by AI, worst case scenario, or certainly they're more problematic. So yeah, it's a slightly nuanced picture, but I agree with you. I mean, I would have thought the headcount would be down slightly, but it's a complicated picture.
Probably more down to restructuring, which I guess we're going to talk about a bit in a moment. But this idea that the industry is sort of refocusing on certain things. So you're right, you might need to let people go with old school skills and hire people with new skills.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this does kind of come on to this next point, actually. One story we did that got quite a lot of attention is that media relations was no longer the priority investment area for agencies, having been usurped by AI investments. We had an interesting comment piece last week, actually, from Alana Moorhead, newsroom editor at Taylor Herring, formerly of The Sun. Alana urged the industry not to cut back on media relations, especially given the opportunities to co-create with journalists as they get more stretched due to newsroom cutbacks. She stressed the importance of good relationships with PR pros when she was at The Sun. And obviously the importance of AI search, it's been said a lot of times, does kind of make media relations more important than ever, one could argue. Were you both surprised by this finding about media relations not being the top investment priority anymore?
Personally, not at all surprised. We've all talked, and I think we're going to go on to talk about the rise in influencer creators, social first sort of journalism. So, of course, you're not necessarily going to hire as many people that are trained to deal with the traditional media when the traditional media is being replaced to a certain extent by new channels to your audiences. So I'm not surprised about that. I'm very interested in what these new AI investments are, though, personally.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've had quite a lot of various sort of press releases, various announcements over the last probably year and a half or so, haven't we? Some of them, to be honest with you, are quite hard to sort of understand what's actually happening. I mean, you look at the amount of investment announced by the big holding companies, and yeah, these are obviously huge organisations and they go way beyond PR. But what was it 400 million announced by WPP? They're investing in AI.
Yeah.
And I know that figure in itself is way inflated for our sector, but it does give you an idea of the sheer amount of investment going on across marketing communications in AI to do various things. And it's a good point.
I think it shows confidence in the fact that I think many believe they understand how media relations work and how they can train their staff. But I think they really want to know how to develop the AI. And I think there is, as many have said to me, that those that boast that they know what they're doing with it, you should take that with a pinch of salt, because it still is a new area. It's an area of growth for PR. And so I think that's why the investment is there, whilst maybe media relations is falling down the agenda a bit because they feel they have that one in the bag.
The greatest knowledge we have is knowing that we know nothing.
Exactly.
Some Socrates for you there.
Thanks.
Going to move on from Socrates. I mean, my take on this is I think the declining importance of media relations in our survey is a kind of relative decline rather than an absolute one. It's absolute versus the relative growing focus on AI, as we've said. And other things as well, Danny, as you mentioned, as agencies kind of shake up what they do. Some stats here. The average investment priority score out of 5 for media relations has been 3.8 for the past 3 years. It's not actually less of a priority. It's just less relative to other things. So I don't think we should see this as PR abandoning media relations in any way.
No.
But it's rather one of many priorities these days. But it does point to the juggling acts that agencies have to do, I think. Another point from the article, actually, I'd be quite good picking up on is the importance of ESG fell notably. So from an average score of 2.9 out of 5 2 years ago, it's just 2.1 out of 5 now. On the one hand, this does chime with the Trumpier retreat on ESG and DEI, doesn't it? Although we've spoken about this before, it is a bit more nuanced, especially when it comes to what's happening in Europe versus the US. But that figure certainly shows that is, to a greater extent, the direction of traffic.
Yeah, well, as somebody once said, I mean, PR's not doing ESG, it's communicating ESG, right? So, and I think we're at a point in history where you can do good things in terms of progressive social policies, environmental policies, and obviously improve your governance. Whether or not you want to campaign on it or shout about what you're doing is a different thing. And without doubt, in this current environment, with Trump in the White House and with a number of other right-wing figures growing up around Europe, you're less wise to shout about these things if you're a company. And that's the business that PR has been in, about putting yourself on a platform and campaigning on these things. You might well see it as worthwhile doing it, and indeed it usually is good to be progressive and innovative in these things, but maybe not shout about it.
I think that's right. It's the whole green hushing argument, isn't it, that we've heard about for the last sort of year or so, I guess. But Siobhan, you wrote some other articles from the Top 150, which, as I say, looks at a number of areas in our sector. What kind of caught your eye from those?
Yeah, so as part of the questionnaire, PRWeek asked agencies if, in general, UK clients were more demanding in terms of the amount of work they expected from them for money in 2025 versus the previous year. We found that just over 4/5 of respondents found clients to be more demanding, and this is an increase on last year's figures. So many agency leaders told us that the tough economic market has put clients under pressure to prove return on investment because, as they put it, the clients want more bang for their buck. And another said that demands were dialed up to 11 already, which sounded very sad. I felt very sorry for that person. Client expectations have been higher, was how Izzy Wood, MD at Consultancy Wardrobe, put it. She said whether this is because there are a large number of agencies promising to deliver results, or because of AI has meant they feel that basically that they should be delivering more with less. Clients are more generally much more plugged into what is happening outside, she continued, and this is probably because they're also being held accountable to senior leadership and so constantly seeing where they could be getting better service. And many highlighted this pressure, this idea that expectations have to continually rise and that clients are seeking more broader, more integrated support across PR, social, influencer, content and experiential within the existing fee structures.
Oh, that's a bit bleak, isn't it?
I know.
That's what I mean. It's why it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Because growth is difficult to get and inflation means costs are going up. So everybody's being squeezed. Everybody's thinking, I need some growth, but nobody's willing to pay for it, essentially.
No. Yeah.
And also your clients, your existing clients, you are expecting you to do more. Who do you get to do those? We need to hire people. It's more expensive to hire people.
Yeah.
Etc. Etc. Etc.
Yeah.
You're right, it is quite bleak.
It is, yeah.
The positive from that is, though, that many of the agencies that completed the survey said they had asked clients for higher fees in response to these rising costs, and the majority of the agencies said that they have been successful with that, which is, I've said on this podcast before that I think this industry should be a bit tougher on charging for what brilliant work they put out. So I think it's great to hear that they were at least successful in that.
That is a good thing. So finally, a word about the future. The Top 150 survey found more than 9 in 10 agency bosses were confident 2026 will be a better year of trading than the previous one. That's about the same as when we asked the question 1 year earlier in relation to 2025. Siobhan, what sort of things are bosses saying about their hopes for this year?
I think the quote that stood out to me came from Rachel Gilly at Clarity. She described 2024 as brutal, which is a very dramatic way of describing it. But in contrast, her agency was among the tech specialists to report growth in double digits or near double digits in 2025. Clarion grew 10%, others like Wildfire and Brands to Life are both up 14%, and Taito similarly rose 9%. When we asked her for an update, she said that 2026 has started with many of the same macroeconomic pressures and global uncertainties. But she said there's more movement in the market than there was this time last year, which is really positive to hear. Both the tech sector and the comms industry are still going through significant transformations, I think we can say. So nobody's getting carried away about it. But she said that she thinks most agency leaders would say the mood feels cautiously optimistic. And I think you both agreed that that's possibly the best way we can describe 2026 so far. And what other agencies have said to you both?
Yeah, I mean, this whole cautiously optimistic is always a bit of a euphemism for it's pretty bad. We don't really know what's going to happen next. But we want to be optimistic. Generally, people in the PR industry are optimistic, and it's a real strength of the industry. I think everybody thinks that things are going to get better, things are going to do well. And I think generally PR people are very adaptable and are good at making things happen and finding the growth where there is. But without doubt, we're pretty much in the same position as we've been over the last 2 years, as far as I can tell. Inflation looks like it's high again. Taxation's going up. There's quite a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. Maybe I'm being really ultimately skeptical, but I can't see why it should be any more optimistic now than it was a year or two ago. Do anybody agree with me?
Well, I guess an optimistic agency might look to something like GEO. The fact that influencer is increasingly be seen as something that earned media is in charge of. I mean, there was Publicis' acquisition of Fabric, sort of social specialist agency, and then putting that into the PR and influence and social division alongside MSL and Taylor Herring, I think sort of shows that actually people do see influencer as possibly more in the earned media world than in other parts of the marketing communications universe. Others might disagree, but I feel that seems like the direction of travel there. So I think you could point to things like this. And, I think there is that sense, if you're in public affairs, for example, that there's a lot of shake-up in, the sort of party system. I mean, we'll see with the elections later this week, actually, you know, the local elections. Some people even saying that the end of the sort of two-party system is upon us. So that suggests you would think more lobbying needed of more new politicians, potentially new civil servants, depending on what happens in central government in the years ahead. So you could say there are some reasons to think there'll be a lot of business still and some reasons to be optimistic. But the flip side is always there. Things are very tough. The margins are tighter than ever.
I particularly agree on the GEO thing you mentioned. I think that possibly is a step change in the industry to a point where, for people who haven't heard about this term yet, it's generative engine optimization. So the idea being that we're now searching, most of us, using AI rather than standard Google searching. And what AI does, it pulls through a different set of sources than previously would have been drawn through by Google. So those sources tend to be more credible journalistic sources or even owned media sources, but at least they're credible. And this is where PR professionals can make more of a difference, because by influencing journalists or experts in the right way, you can actually give a positive finding to your company in an AI search. And that potentially changes the game a bit, whereas previously there was this feeling that maybe Google search could be fixed by spending money rather than by using influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it does come up in quite a lot of the comments, you know. And it's also GEO. I asked, when going back to the top investment priorities question, I asked specifically about GEO, and it was quite near the top. So alongside AI being the top one, GEO is maybe third or fourth. So yeah, I mean, I do think you're right. There's definitely an opportunity there. And I think it pays to be optimistic about that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it does. And going back to your other point, John, public affairs was also another area of growth and investment, as was crisis. So, you know, if we're in a time of rapid change, organisations and businesses need good counsel now more than ever, and that's where PR can step in.
Particularly on crisis, I think. I'm more sceptical on public affairs because I think this uncertainty and redrawing of the political map has been happening for quite a few years now, and it's still been quite subdued in the public affairs world. Also, I'm not sure how much money a lot of these new political parties are going to be spending, or how able businesses will be to spend on them. If they're the Greens or Reform, are they going to get big corporate investment in trying to get to know these people? I don't know.
Well, no, it's a good question. I mean, I remember we had last autumn, we had a podcast on the party seasons and coming up, and there was definitely that question about how much people are going to be going to, well, reform them. This was probably before the green shoots, let's call it, the green shoots, recovery of the Greens, the surging of the Greens. But there was definitely a sense that reform needed to be engaged with more. So we'll see. But it's interesting how it's such a common thing now for corporate and public affairs to be absolutely sort of joined at the hip when it comes to these things. So if you look at a lot of the bigger agencies, that is the sort of powerhouse super division, really. So those two things I think are increasingly going to be aligned and hard to sort of prize apart, which is another big trend that the industry's had to get used to in recent years, particularly, I'd say.
Well, I guess we'll get a clearer view after this week's local elections in terms of the way the political landscape is going to look for the next few years. So watch with interest.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I was going to say as well was that, we've seen the rise of content creation and influencer work has been an area, but we've got, new industries like sport. I mean, it's going to be the summer of sport. So, that could be a positive for the financials for many of these agencies in the next few months.
So let's talk about another couple of specific sectors. Let's start with consumer first. Danny, how did you see consumer PR faring last year and since?
Consumer PR seems to be, I think it's had a tough couple of years, although if you look at the figures for some of the bigger consumer consultancies like Romans, Taylor Herring, and so on, Strike Communications, they all had very good growth, and they're all classic consumer agencies. Pretty Green as well, another agency that's had a particularly good year. So if you are a good, innovative consumer agency, I think you might have done pretty well over the past year. If you're, again, a so-so undifferentiated consumer agency, you've probably had quite a tough time, because I think it has been a tough market. And I was talking to a colleague on our sister title campaign today, and they were saying that it's the same thing in advertising. If you're specialist and good, and particularly independent, you can really make a lot of money in advertising at the moment. If you're big and generalist and slow to innovate, it's pretty difficult. So I think you get the same picture. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, I do. And again, I think the fact that the sort of influencer and social world seems to fit a lot more in earned media these days has been a boost for a lot of consumer agencies that can really put themselves there as influencer specialists and social media specialists and respond quickly. I mean, that's one of our industry's great strengths, isn't it? It moves quicker. The cliche moving at the speed of culture that we hear a lot, but it is kind of true, isn't it?
I don't like that sentence, John.
I know, it's kind of why I used it.
But you're right, the Romans, they've gone into doing more corporate. There's examples of them looking at outside just the straight consumer now to really bolster, and especially when clients are coming to them, I imagine, with one challenge and then bringing on another, and it's that add-on, bolt-on work that's then achieving great success. And that seems to be the way of growth at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's right. I thought I'd touch on healthcare comms a little bit. I mean, this is another sector. We spoke about tech a bit earlier on. This is kind of similar in a way. It's a part of the industry that around the COVID times, for very obvious reasons, did very well and then has struggled in recent years. There were some positive signs there. I mean, we saw the big healthcare agencies, Real Chemistry up 16%, Inizio and Vogue was up, just 4%, but it was still growth, and both shrunk in the previous years, and some smaller agencies grew faster. Some were kind of a bit more flat or in small decline. Syneos Health was down 3%, Axon down 10%. Some interesting comments here. I spoke to Nikki Woolsby, who's MD for PR and External Affairs at Syneos Health. She was talking about a lot of in-housing of services that would classically be deployed by the agency happening, which is an interesting trend that you hear a lot more about in the advertising world, I think, but can still affect this industry. But her view is she expects to see a reversal of some of that in-housing as clients realise that the complexities of decoupling those services from kind of broader strategic consulting is a bit more difficult than they think. And she also talks about coming together of policy and comms in a more intentional way, which is quite an interesting trend. This idea that comms people are more expected to also be pretty good at policy functions when it comes to healthcare. So I think that's quite a good sort of feather to the sort of healthcare comms specialist's bow, really, that, you're much more than a comms person, really, with the level of expertise in that sector. So it's not hunky-dory in healthcare, I'd say, overall, but it feels like it's probably a bit better than it was. Is it maybe the overall view there?
The previous year was very tough in healthcare, and we, for the first time, noticed pretty slow growth in healthcare, whereas traditionally it's always been a high growth business. And it fundamentally feels a high growth business to me. The aging population, more blockbuster drugs coming up around the world. Like you say, John, a lot of complexity when you're communicating healthcare solutions. You only have to look at somewhere like the US at the moment, where you've got some quite strong views, shall we say, by people in health authorities about vaccines and certain treatments. So drug companies and healthcare services have got a big challenge in how they communicate their services and products. And that's without doubt a rich seam of work.
No, I agree. I think it's good to end on a high note. I think we should talk about sports. Sport's been pretty strong in 2025 and since, I think. Obviously, next month, we've got the World Cup kicking off. You know, as I say, end on a positive. Danny, what are your thoughts on sports and the PR opportunities there?
You say it's a good time to talk about sport. As a Chelsea fan, it's not particularly a good time to talk about sport, since we've lost the last 6 games without actually scoring a goal. But no, you're right. We've got the World Cup to look forward to this year, and it's going to be the biggest ever World Cup with more teams and go on for longer and longer, lots of brand involvement in it. And as Siobhan, as you said earlier, you've got the influencer side of things. It's kind of merging, isn't it? Sport and entertainment is increasingly merging. So a lot of the sports people become influencers in their own right, with lots of communications around that. And equally, you've got influencers who attach themselves to sporting events and build their own following from that. So sport generally is a growth business, and we've seen within the table agencies like Fuse, for example, got what growth was it?
23%.
23% growth for Fuse, the Omnicom sports PR agency. So that shows. And lots of other agencies within our table as well who specialise in sports have had a very good year. And I think it's because in this age of too many mobile phones and too much fakery, people want real, authentic experiences. They want live events that hopefully can't be fixed or altered. And it's a sort of content that brings everybody together globally. So it's without doubt giving a boost to marketing and communications.
Yeah, and the wider world overall as well.
Yeah, I think so. A bit of cheer, hopefully.
Great. Well, that's a good place to end it, I think. And that's all the time we have. Thanks to Danny and Siobhan. Stay tuned to PRWeek.co.uk all this month for all the rankings tables, analyses and profile interviews from the top 150. Thanks for listening and goodbye.